Hi everyone, it's me. For my final bookmas video, I decided to do just a little fun book tag. I've been seeing these pop up on YouTube lately, so yeah, I just thought it'd be a fun idea. I have taken most of my book tag prompts from Destiny Sidwell's YouTube video as well as Rachel Catherine, so shout out to them. But yeah, it's basically the end of 2023. By the time I'm filming this video, there are like a couple weeks left in the year, but basically I've read almost all the books that I will read for this year, so yeah, let's just do a book tag. Getting straight into it, my first prompt is the most disappointing read of the year. I never really like to rate books negatively or talk bad about any books because I feel like books that I don't like aren't necessarily bad. They just weren't the right books for me, or maybe I read them at the wrong time. But I'm going to have to say the most disappointing book for me of this year was The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King by Carissa Broadbent. I'm so sorry. So if you guys don't know what this book is, it is the sequel to The Serpent and the Wings of the Night, which was a super popular book like earlier this year. This is a fantasy. I can't remember if it's young adult or adult, but it's a fantasy romance. I did read both of the books this year. The first one, the Serpent book, I thought was like okay. It wasn't bad, it was all right. It was nothing like groundbreaking for me, but it was interesting enough to make me interested in reading the sequel. But then I picked up the sequel and it was so disappointing to me. Especially I think because a lot of people were talking about this book and they were like, this is the new ACOTAR, or if you like Fourth Wing, you'll like this book. And it just like for some reason didn't do it for me. My personal opinions on the sequel: the main characters did a full 180 turn on themselves. They weren't really acting like how they acted in the first book. I feel like things were happening, but somehow the plot wasn't going anywhere. The romance in this book just didn't hit for me. I didn't feel the chemistry between the two characters. It felt very forced, and I felt that this book was just filled with trope after trope just to put the trope in, and there wasn't a genuine connection between the characters for me. It was just like, we're gonna throw you two together because you're a great enemies to lovers type of trope. So yeah, unfortunately after reading this sequel, I was just so disappointed. I know there are more books coming in this series and I just have decided I'm not gonna continue, which sucks. I actually have the books right there. They're on my shelf. They're beautiful books too, but yeah, the writing just didn't do it for me. Okay, next we're going to choose an underdog book. I'm going to pick, and this isn't really an underdog book, but it's underdog for me, Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt. I know that this book is not like unknown. It's actually got so many ratings on Goodreads, so I know a lot of people have read this book, but for me, it was an underdog book in the sense that like I kind of picked it up not knowing what the heck it was. I thought it was just going to be a random kind of in-between read that was maybe going to be cute, that was probably going to be like a 3-star read. It was the debut book of this author, so you know, with debut books you're not really expecting too much usually. And yeah, I just kind of went into it blind. All I knew about it was that it was a book about an octopus, and then I read it and then I gave it like either a 4.5 or a 5-star. It was so good. It made me cry. It was so heartwarming. And I just feel like I connected to this book a lot more than I expected to. So this book is a contemporary fiction. It's literally about an octopus. And I read this book so long ago, I'm probably forgetting all the details. We have a couple of different characters. So we have like an older woman, we have a younger, like young adult male, and we have this octopus. And then we just see all these characters coming together and seeing how they like, I don't know, figure out their lives with one another. We get some very unlikely pairings, and yeah, just the connections that the characters made in the story. They were just so heartwarming, and I love octopi. That's the plural of octopus, right? I don't know. This was such a good book. And my description of it definitely didn't do it any justice, but so good, you guys. Okay, and then moving on to an overhyped book. I want to say The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King or The Serpent and the Wings of the Night again, but I already mentioned them. So I'm going to say The Things We Never Got Over by Lucy Score. I actually read this in one of my bookmas videos. It was bookmas 3, I think. So if you want to see my full reading experience, go watch that video. But this book has over 600,000 ratings on Goodreads, and it's like a 4.2 rating. I went into it being like, this is gonna be a good book. Probably, right? I can see why people would like it. Like I could see why this book is a lot of people's cups of tea. You know what I mean? I could just see why people would like this book. But I'm just thinking maybe I was not the right target audience for this book. I did enjoy aspects of it. I liked a lot of the side stories that happened in this book. By the way, it's a contemporary romance adult, but the main romance story in this book just did not do it for me. The two main characters were both very annoying to me. Like, I just didn't like them individually, and then I also didn't like them together. So I liked the side stories, I loved the side characters, but I feel like when you're reading a contemporary romance, if you don't like the two main characters, it's gonna be pretty hard to enjoy the book. There was also a lot of smut in this book, which I didn't expect. Maybe I should have looked more into it before I dove into this book, but there's so much smut, and from the cover of the book, it just looks like a really cutesy, fun romance. And I'm not like a hater of smut or spice. Like, I enjoy a good spice scene if there's enough build up to it, if it's written well, if it's not overdone. These scenes didn't do it for me. There was so much of it. I feel like the dialogue during the spice scenes was also just making me like uncomfortable. Just not my style, not my type, not my preference. But yeah, that was probably the most overhyped book that I read this year. A book that surprised me is the next one. I'm gonna say Something Wilder by Christina Lauren. This is a contemporary romance by Christina Lauren, obviously. And this book was just so unexpected for me because I have read a lot of Christina Lauren. I love this author duo. I think everything I've read by them, I've just really enjoyed. So yeah, I just picked up this book kind of blind. I didn't even read the synopsis. I didn't look into it. I just saw the name Christina Lauren and I was like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna buy it, I'm gonna read it. And I would say that most Christina Lauren books that I've read all have a similar tone. Like, you pick up a Christina Lauren book and you know what you're gonna get yourself into, but that was just not the case for Something Wilder. What I didn't expect was an outrageously silly and fun adventure about like a treasure hunt in these canyons in a desert, all inclusive of like shoot 'em out type scenes, deciphering hidden secret codes, and like a lot of action. Very unexpected. This book took a lot of turns that I absolutely did not predict, but nonetheless, I still really enjoyed it. It was a really, really fun book. It was so silly and yeah, just so outrageous. And I had a really good time reading it, so yeah. Favorite book couple of the year. I'm gonna mention a couple because I feel like I can't narrow this down to just one. And I feel like I'm gonna sound so basic by saying this, but I did fall down through the SJM portal this year, okay? This was the year that I discovered Sarah J Maas. This is the year that I picked up my first Sarah J Maas book and then went on the 15-book spiral through her universe. So obviously I'm gonna have to say Feyre and Rhysand from the ACOTAR series. I just feel like they just enemied to lovered so well. And the things that they went through and stuck together through, one of the all-time best book couples, I feel. I also do want to give honorable mentions to Evangeline and Jax from the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy by Stephanie Garber, Violet and Xaden obviously in the Fourth Wing series, or the Empyrean it's technically called, by Rebecca Yarros. And just to throw in a non-fantasy couple, I'm going to say Harriet and Wynne from Happy Place by Emily Henry. I just really love the two of them, and I'm usually not a fan of like the miscommunication trope, which was a very, very large play in this romance book, but for me, it worked in this book. I don't know, it just seemed more realistic to me the way it was done, and I really liked the two of them together. Moving on to favorite main character of the year. This one is so easy for me, you guys. Elin, Ash River Galathinius from the Throne of Glass series, also in the Sarah J Maas world. She is just, I feel like every female main character I read now, I just compare to Elin, and she's still the best. She's still the top by far, so love her. The most frustrating book of the year, I'm gonna have to say, was The Secret History by Donna Tartt. So this is a dark academia. It's set in, I don't even remember where it's set in. I think it's like a school in Maine. Maybe, I could be getting that so wrong. But this is one of the books I went into with such high expectations because I was like so in the mood to read a dark academia when I picked up this book, and it was fall and it was crunchy leaf season, and I was just like, I was so excited. And then I read it, and then I was so disappointed, and I was really frustrated while I was reading this book because I really wanted to like it. I liked the setting, I liked the premise of it, but the thing that I was the most frustrated about in this book is that I hated every single character in this book. And that may have been the point, but I feel like if there's not even like one redeeming thing about any character in a book, it's so hard to keep reading it. And I was so frustrated at everyone in this book. I was like, if I knew anyone in this book in the real world, they would be the most annoying person in the world. Like, everyone is just so I was getting really frustrated reading about these characters. I just wanted to find one thing that I could latch on to, at least a single one of these characters that I could relate to, and then I could be like, okay, that's the character I'm rooting for. But yeah, I just couldn't find that connection in this book, and so it made it very frustrating for me to read. I almost DNF'd this book, but as you guys know, I'm really bad at DNFing. Once I start a book, I'm so stubborn that I feel like I just need to finish everything I start. So if I ever were to DNF a book, this would probably be the one, but I just forced myself to push through, and that probably just made it even more frustrating. Next, we're gonna choose my favorite cover of the year. I'm gonna have to say A Curse for True Love by Stephanie Garber. I feel like all of her books, especially in this series, just have been so gorgeous. Every edition that I've seen, like the UK, the US, the special editions, oh, they're just so pretty. And not only are the like external covers, like the dust jackets on the hardcovers, so beautiful, but you take off the dust jackets and underneath on this book, there's so many different editions of even the foiling variations. I got the Indigo exclusive one, which I think is the same as the Barnes & Noble exclusive one, and it just, we get the title of The Ballad of the Archer and the Fox, and that has so much significance in the story, and it's so pretty, and it made me so happy while reading the book. So definitely the most beautiful book I own, I think. A book I haven't stopped thinking about. I'm actually gonna choose the same book that Destiny Sidwell chose in her book tag video. I would say anything Sarah J Maas in general, but more specifically House of Sky and Breath. This is the third Crescent City book, and I'm not gonna say too much about it because I feel like I can't talk about this book without spoiling a lot of things, but just, this is a sign. If you haven't tried a Sarah J Maas book and you like fantasy or fantasy romance, like, go for it. It's so good. It's so addictive. And the way that this book just started to connect things together, if you know what I mean, if you know, you know, it just blew my mind. And by the end of this book, after that last chapter, my brain was working overtime trying to like make connections and like think back to previous books and just like connect everything together, and it was just insane. So I can honestly say I have not stopped thinking about this book. Like, these characters are still in my mind, the plot is still in my mind, my predictions for what's gonna come next still in my mind, and the next book, Crescent City 3 or The House of Flame and Shadow, is coming out January 30th, so I'm so excited. Definitely gonna make a reading vlog for that book when it comes out because it's just gonna be a lot of emotions. This next tag is really interesting. The highest rated and lowest rated on Goodreads book that you've read in 2023. So I checked my list of books I read this year, and the highest rated is very well deserved, The Kingdom of Ash by Sarah J Maas. I think rightfully so. This is the 8th and final book in the Throne of Glass series, and the way that this book just tied everything together was so good. Like, you've been following these characters, you've been following the story, and you follow so many characters by the end of this series. You slowly get introduced to them throughout, but by the end, there are so many characters that you are just like invested in. And the way that this finale tied up everything, connected everything, it was just so wonderful and so emotional. And this is one of those books that you put down and you just feel like you've lost all your friends because you're not going to read about them ever again, and it's kind of sad, but it was so good. And yes, it did leave me feeling quite empty, but in the most beautiful way. Oh, and the rating of Kingdom of Ash is like 4.68 or something ridiculous like that. But the lowest rated book I read this year was Lunch in Paris, A Love Story with Recipes by Elizabeth Bard, and this has a 3.67 rating, and I think, honestly, I kind of agree. This definitely wasn't my favorite book I read this year. It's one of those books that I honestly don't remember too much of because I read it and then I just put it back on my shelf and completely forgot about it. Like, it did not resonate with me really all too much. And it wasn't a terrible book. Like, it wasn't bad, but I feel like I didn't connect with it. And I think one of the reasons actually why I didn't connect with it is, okay, so this book is about a girl or a woman who moves from America to Paris, and she documents her experience, how she felt culture shock, and then just how she transitions into this new culture. And while I was reading this, I don't know why, I thought this book was fiction, but turns out it's actually an autobiography. It's actually a memoir. And so while I was reading this book, I was like, where's the plot? Where's the story? What's even going on here? And then, yeah, I realized it was supposed to be a memoir, or it is a memoir. And then once I realized that after the fact, I was like, oh, that makes so much more sense. That's why the entire book was more like self-reflection and not about like moving the story forward. So yeah, I had a very strange experience reading this book. Coziest book, I'm gonna say Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. I feel like I've talked about this book a few times on my channel, but this entire book takes place in a coffee shop in Tokyo, and it's kind of a collection of short stories where different customers come in, and they come in with their own backstories and the reasons why they want to go back in time, because in this cafe they offer a rare experience of traveling back in time for whatever reason. And this book isn't fantasy, it's magical realism, so it's not like so fantastical and magical, but I found this book to be just really cozy. You learn about a bunch of different characters and their various reasons for why they want to travel back in time, like if they just want to talk to that one person one last time or try and like get some information they missed from the past. It's all set in a coffee shop, so like how much cozier can you get? And I found the little stories just all very heartwarming. A book that made me cry, I'm gonna say A Little Life by Hanya hold on. I always struggle with this last name. Yanagihara. This book was honestly just really depressing. This is a literary fiction, follows 4 characters. It's like a group of friends from college as they grow up, as they find their way in New York City or the greater New York. And it's just really sad. Probably the saddest book I've ever read. And when I initially read this book, I gave it a pretty high rating. I gave it a 4.5 star. But now thinking back at it, I think I need to lower that rating, because I gave that rating because I was so shocked by the end of the book. I felt so emotional. And in my mind, I was like, if a book can make me that sad or like alter my mood that much, it must be a good book, right? But now thinking back, I'm like, was it really a good book? Did we get character development? What was the purpose of it? Is a book good just because it makes you sad? Or should it take you on a journey of a wider range of emotion, you know? And I feel like these days I do prefer books that, you know, they have ups and downs and they have roller coasters, and it's not just like a monotonous sadness, which now thinking back, this book kind of was. Definitely a sad book. Check trigger warnings before you dive into it if you decide to, because it's tough. Gonna leave it at that. I also want to mention House of Earth and Fire. This is the first book in the Crescent City series. I know I'm mentioning Sarah J Maas again, but she did have such a big impact on me this year. And this book made me cry, as did a lot of books. I cry a lot when I read, okay? But this book was really funny to me because as I was reading it, throughout the whole first like 3/4 of the book, I felt like I was not connecting to the story, not connecting to the characters. I started this right after I finished the Throne of Glass series, so I feel like I was just so attached to those characters still and thinking about them that I couldn't move on to appreciate these new characters in this new world and this new story. I don't know, maybe it was my mind being stubborn, but I was like, I don't know, I'm not really feeling it, I'm not into this. And then an incident occurs, a character dies. And I feel like that's not a spoiler because in most fantasy books, especially Sarah J Maas, like these epic fantasy books, there's always someone who dies, right? But I'm not gonna tell you who dies. There was a death, and all of a sudden, I started sobbing. And it was in that moment that I realized that I was actually really connected to these characters and this world and the story, and it just really hit me by surprise. And then after that point, I was like fully invested in it. So I found that really funny because I was like, I don't know, I was so stubborn. I was like, no, this is not it. And then all of a sudden I was sobbing. So yeah. A book that made me happy. This is a hard one because I feel like most books end up making me happy. Like every book with a happy ending leaves me feeling happy after reading it. But I'm gonna pick 5 Star Weekend by Elin Hilderbrand. This was such a nice little contemporary fiction. It's about a group of adult women who are kind of mismatched. They're all connected through one person, and they take this like ultimate girls weekend on Nantucket Island. It was just so feel good. We have a lot of self-growth growth in this book. We have like new adult connection friendships made. We like resolve lots of issues from the past with these characters. And I found this book so heartwarming and nice, and it was such a good story. I also feel like all of Elin Hilderbrand's books make me really happy because they're all set on Nantucket, and that's where she grew up or where she lives. And you can just feel her love for this island through her books. Like the way she writes about Nantucket, you can feel how happy she is on that island. And to be honest, before I read Elin Hilderbrand books, Nantucket was never a place on my like travel bucket destination list. I just never thought about it, but like now after reading her books, I'm like, I need to go there at some point in my life because I can feel the joy through the pages, just like her love of the place. And so yeah, this book made me really happy. Okay, I'm gonna do one more prompt because I feel like I've been talking for so long, but this last prompt is going to be a book series I'm excited to continue. There are so many of these, so I'm gonna split this up into fully released series and then not fully released series, like ongoing series. So for fully released series that I've started this year and that I'm so excited to continue, first one is going to be the Folk of the Air trilogy by Holly Black. So I read The Cruel Prince, which is the first book this year, and it was so good. I loved it. It was funny, it didn't take itself too seriously, but it also was serious at the same time. Really excited to move on in that world. Next is going to be A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab, another fantasy trilogy, a bit darker, but this world was just so incredibly built. I'm really excited to dive back into this again. And then for series that are not fully released yet, so they're still ongoing, but I'm definitely gonna continue. Crescent City I've already mentioned a lot of times. The next book comes out January 30th, which I'm so excited about. And then after that, Sarah J. Maas is on to the next ACOTAR book, which is so exciting because rumors are, I feel like it's been confirmed, the next book is going to be Elaine's book, which is the third sister, and I just feel like I relate to Elaine so much, like being that quieter, not really warrior-like character. We don't see those too much in fantasy books, and so I'm really excited to see more inside Elaine's head. Next is going to be the Empyrean series, of course, by Rebecca Yarros, also known as Fourth Wing. The third book and the release date hasn't officially been announced yet, but there have been clues pointing to the fact that this book may be released December 2024. So I am really hoping that we get this next year. And yeah, okay, so those are all of my prompts. This year was such a good year of reading. But yeah, I'm gonna leave this video here. I hope you enjoyed it. You know, it'd be really fun if you guys also picked books under all the prompts that I did and then commented them down below so we could all like see different books that we all read this year and how they resonated with us. And yeah, if you like this video, please leave me a like and a comment. If you don't know what to comment down below, let me know what your favorite book of the year was. If you like me, subscribe, do that bell thing, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!